I still have the keys. 42 of them. They used to be just metal, brass and nickel, cut to fit specific tumblers. But now they are the only reason I still exist. In a world where sight has become a death sentence, these keys are my eyes. I can find a lock in the pitch black by the feel of the scratch on the handle. I know which door is which by the squeak of the hinge. My name is Elias Thorne. I was the head custodian at North Central High. And if you are listening to this tape, if you found this recorder in the boiler room, don't turn on your flashlight. Please. Trust me. Light doesn't help. The fog just eats it. It started on a Tuesday, mid-January. But it wasn't a blizzard. The weathermen didn't know what to call it. They said a pressure system was moving in. They said to expect heavy overcast. They were wrong. I arrived at 5:30 a.m. My routine was sacred. Unlock the loading dock. Start the coffee in the break room. 3 scoops of grounds, 1 pinch of salt to cut the bitterness. Check the pressure gauges on the main boiler. When I pulled into the lot, the sky wasn't dark because it was night. It was dark because the stars were gone. I remember standing by the dumpsters around 6 a.m. Usually, you can see the lights of the town down in the valley. The street lights, the radio tower blinking red, the highway. But that morning, the valley was gone. It wasn't just cloudy. It was a wall. A towering, shifting wall of ink-black vapor rising from the ground, swallowing the world from the bottom up. It didn't look like smoke. Smoke moves with the wind. This stuff. It moved like it was thinking. It was heavy. It hugged the asphalt. I didn't think apocalypse. I thought industrial accident. I thought maybe the chemical plant 3 towns over had blown a stack. I went inside. I locked the loading dock door. That was the first time my gut told me something was wrong. I didn't just latch it. I threw the deadbolt. I didn't know why. I just felt exposed. Inside, the school was bright. The fluorescent lights hummed. The smell of floor wax and old lockers felt safe. I started my rounds. By 7:30 a.m., the kids started arriving. But the mood was off. Usually, they're loud, pushing each other, laughing. Today, they came in shaking off the cold, looking over their shoulders. "It's so dark out there," I heard a freshman girl whisper near the cafeteria. My dad couldn't see the hood of the car. I kept mopping. Zone 4. The main entryway. I watched the glass doors. Outside, the darkness was pressing against the panes. It wasn't grey mist. It was Vantablack. It looked like someone had painted the windows with tar. At 8 a.m., the first bell rang. But the buses were late. I was standing in the vestibule, that little glass box between the outside doors and the inner security doors. I was salting the mats. Bus 42 pulled up. I could barely see it. Just the twin beams of its headlights cutting through the black soup. It stopped right at the curb, maybe 10 feet from me. Mrs. Gable, the vice principal, was out there. She was holding a flashlight, waving it, trying to guide the kids off the bus. I watched her through the glass. The fog swirled around her ankles, then her waist. It was thick, oily. The bus door hissed open. I saw a student step off. A boy. Blue backpack. He stepped down into the fog, and he didn't hit the pavement. He just ceased. 1 second, he was stepping down. The fog swirled up to meet him, and then there was just empty space. No sound, no thud, no scream. Mrs. Gable didn't notice at first. She was looking at her clipboard. Keep moving, she was saying. I could hear her muffled voice through the glass. The next student stepped off. A girl. I saw her face. She looked confused, squinting into the black. She took a step. Gone. It was like watching a magic trick, but wrong. The air just swallowed them. I dropped my bag of salt. It hit the floor with a slap. Mrs. Gable looked up. She looked at the open bus door. She realized no one was standing there. She looked at the driver. "Jerry," she called out, "where are the kids?" She took a step toward the bus. The fog rose up, like a tide coming in fast. It reached her chest. I shouted. I slammed my hand against the glass from the inside. "Martha!" "No." She turned to look at me. She saw me banging on the glass. Her eyes went wide. She reached her hand out toward me, mouthing the word help. The fog drifted over her head. I waited for it to clear. I waited to see her silhouette. But when the black wisp moved a second later, the sidewalk was empty. Her clipboard was lying on the ground. That was it. Just a clipboard and a flashlight, its beam dying in the gloom. The bus was still idling, the engine purring. But inside, I couldn't see Jerry anymore. The bus was empty. I backed away from the door. My heart wasn't beating. It was vibrating. I locked the inner vestibule doors. I used my master key. My hands were steady. That strange calm that comes when your brain refuses to process reality. They're gone, I thought. They didn't die. They just went away. Then the lights flickered. The black fog wasn't just outside. It was seeping in. I saw it curling under the cracks of the exterior doors. Tendrils of black smoke, heavier than air, sliding across the white terrazzo floor like snakes. The intercom clicked on. It was Principal Henderson. "Attention, students and staff. We are experiencing a power fluctuation. Please remain in your..." His voice stopped, not cut off by static, just stopped. I heard a sound over the intercom, a sharp intake of breath, and then the microphone hit the desk. Thud. Then silence. I turned around. The main hallway, the Commons, was full of students. Maybe 200 of them. They were staring at the vents. The black fog was pouring out of the HVAC system now. It was cascading down from the ceiling like dry ice, but dark. "Run!" a senior boy shouted. "But you can't run from air." The panic started. But it was the quietest riot I have ever seen. I watched a group of teachers trying to herd kids into the library. The fog rolled over them. It moved fast, impossibly fast. It enveloped a math teacher, Mr. Davies. He was shouting instructions. The fog covered him. His voice just deleted. When the fog rolled past, his shoes were left on the floor, tied, laced. Just empty shoes. The kids started screaming then, but the screams were short. As soon as the fog touched them, the sound vanished with the person. I ran. I didn't run into the open. I ran for the wall. I closed my eyes. That was the secret. That was the only reason I'm here. I realized in that split second, if you look at it, you freeze. If you try to see, you panic. I closed my eyes tight. I put my hand on the cold cinder-block wall of the hallway. I knew this wall. I knew the texture of the paint. I knew that in 20 steps there was a fire extinguisher. In 30 steps, the trophy case. In 40 steps, the door to the utility corridor. I ran blind. I heard the chaos around me. I felt people brushing past me. I felt the cold, damp chill of the fog touching my face, like a wet spiderweb. Don't look. Don't look. Don't look. My shoulder hit the fire extinguisher cabinet. 20 steps. I kept moving. I stumbled over a backpack. I heard a girl crying right next to my ear, and then the crying stopped instantly. 30 steps. Trophy case. I felt the glass under my fingertips. I fumbled for my keys. I didn't look. I couldn't look. If I opened my eyes and saw that black nothingness, I knew I'd never move again. I found the jagged key, the one with the tape on the head. I felt for the keyhole. Behind me, the hallway was becoming terrifyingly quiet. The screams were fewer. The thuds of running feet were disappearing. I got the key in. I turned it. I shoved the door open, fell inside, and slammed it shut. I threw the deadbolt. I stood there in the dark. But this was my dark. The utility corridor. It smelled of dust and copper. I opened my eyes. It was pitch black in here, but it was natural darkness. The air was clear. I was alone. I made my way down to the boiler room. I didn't use a flashlight. I didn't need one. I navigated by touch. Hand on the pipe overhead. Count the rivets. Step down. I locked myself in the boiler room. The heavy steel door. The reinforced concrete. I sat there for an hour, listening. The school above me should have been loud. 1,200 students. Staff. But there was nothing. No footsteps. No alarms. Just the deep, structural groaning of the building. The fog had taken them. It had scrubbed the building clean. I went to the monitors. The security cameras. I turned one on. The library. The screen was just black. No static. Just solid black. The camera was working, but there was nothing to see. The fog had filled the room completely. I checked the gym. Black. I checked the hallways. Black. Then, I checked the sub-level corridor. The hallway right outside my door. It was clear. The camera showed the empty concrete hall. The emergency lights were flickering. I saw something on the floor, right outside my door. It was a shoe. A red Converse sneaker. I leaned closer to the monitor. The shoe moved. It wasn't empty. There was a foot in it. The camera angle was bad. I couldn't see the rest of the body. Just a leg, dragging itself. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from the heavy steel door, right next to my head. Someone was out there. Mr. Thorne. It wasn't a student. It was Mr. Henderson, the principal. But his voice. It sounded wrong. It sounded hollow, like he was speaking into a tin can. Elias, open the door. It's safe now. The fog is gone. I looked at the monitor. The hallway was clear. The fog wasn't there. Open the door, Elias. We need your keys. We need to get out. I reached for the deadbolt. My hand touched the cold metal, but then I stopped. On the monitor, I zoomed in on the leg. The red sneaker. The leg didn't have a shadow. The emergency light was casting shadows for the pipes, for the trash can, but not for the leg. Elias. The voice through the door got deeper. Angry. Open the door. I pulled my hand back. You're not Mr. Henderson, I whispered. Silence. Then, a laugh. It wasn't human. It sounded like wind rushing through a broken window. "Smart janitor," the voice hissed. And then the black fog started to seep underneath the steel door. The fog didn't move like smoke. Smoke diffuses. It thins out. This stuff. It poured under the door like spilled oil. It was viscous. Heavy. It pooled on the concrete floor, blacker than the shadow of the boiler. And it was cold. God, the cold coming off that small puddle dropped the temperature in the room by 10 degrees in seconds. My breath started to fog up, white steam meeting black mist. "Open the door, Elias." The voice outside changed. It wasn't Principal Henderson anymore. It was Mrs. Gable now. I dropped my clipboard. "Just let me in." I didn't answer. "You don't talk to a leak. You fix it." I scrambled backward, knocking over a bucket of oily rags. My eyes darted around the room. Tools. Materials. Think. I grabbed a can of expanding foam insulation. Great stuff. The orange can. I shook it. The ball bearing inside rattled. Clack, clack, clack. "Don't ignore me, Mr. Thorne," the voice snarled. It was a deep, distorted growl now, like a record played at the wrong speed. The doorknob rattled. Violent. The steel door bowed inward for a second. Boom. I crawled toward the door. It felt suicidal, moving toward that black sludge. The fog was inches from my fingers. It didn't smell like ozone anymore. It smelled like deep earth, like a grave that had been open too long. I jammed the nozzle of the foam can into the crack at the bottom of the door, right where the black soup was bubbling in. I pulled the trigger. The yellow foam hissed out, expanding, bubbling. It met the black fog. And the fog recoiled. That was the first thing I learned about the enemy. It has mass. It has substance. The foam expanded, pushing the black sludge back out into the hallway. I didn't stop. I ran a bead along the entire bottom threshold, then the sides, then the top. I sealed that door until the can sputtered empty. The banging stopped. The voice stopped. I sat there, staring at the yellow foam hardening around the door frame. It looked like an infected wound. But the silence that followed was worse than the banging, because now I was trapped. I had just glued shut my only exit. I was in a concrete box, 2 levels underground, with 3 massive boilers that were slowly running out of fuel. I checked my watch. 12:15 p.m. I had been down here for hours. I needed to think. The school was compromised. The hallways were kill zones. The exterior was gone. But the building still had veins. I looked up. Above the massive boilers, tangled in the rafters, was a network of silver ducts and insulated pipes. The steam tunnels. When they built North Central back in '78, they built it to last. They ran a service crawl space above the drop ceilings of the first floor, carrying the high-pressure steam pipes to the radiators. It was tight, maybe 3 feet of clearance, filled with fiberglass insulation and rat traps. But it was enclosed. It was behind the walls. If the fog was moving through the open air of the hallways, maybe, just maybe, the walls were still safe. Getting up there was agony. I'm 54 years old. My knees are shot from 20 years of buffering floors. I dragged a ladder over to the main steam manifold. I climbed up, past the heat of the boilers. It was hot up there, dusty. The air tasted like dry rot. I found the access hatch, a square panel screwed into the galvanized steel ductwork. I pulled my multi-tool from my belt, a Leatherman I've carried since 1995. I undid the 4 hex screws. I pushed the panel aside. Darkness. Absolute, dusty darkness. I pulled my maglite from my belt. I hesitated. Light attracts them. No, the fog eats light. But up here. If the fog was up here, I was dead anyway. I clicked it on. The beam cut through the dust motes. The tunnel stretched out in front of me, a long, narrow throat of metal and insulation. It was clear. No black mist. Just silver wrap and cobwebs. I hauled myself up. It was a shimmy. Belly on the metal, elbows digging in. I dragged my tool bag behind me. I replaced the hatch cover from the inside. I didn't screw it down, couldn't reach, but I slid it back into place. I was in the walls now. I started crawling. You have to understand the layout. The boiler room is under the cafeteria. To get to the academic wing, where the classrooms are, I had to crawl north about 200 feet, past the gymnasium intake. The sound in the tunnels was amplified. Every time my boots scraped the metal, it sounded like a cymbal crash. I tried to move like a ghost. Slide. Pause. Listen. Slide. Pause. Listen. I was passing over the cafeteria now. I stopped. There were vents here. Downward-facing grates that let the heat into the room below. I crawled to one. The light coming through the slats was dim. I peered down. The cafeteria was below me. I could see only a slice of it. An overturned table. A tray of nachos spilled on the floor. The cheese congealed and cold. And the fog. It was filling the room like water in a fish tank. It was waist-high down there. And floating in it. I clamped a hand over my mouth. Floating in the black mist were things. Not bodies. Items. Backpacks. Shoes. A single hearing aid. A pair of glasses. They were suspended in the fog, drifting gently, like debris in a slow river. The people who owned them, gone. Vaporized. Erased. But the fog didn't want the plastic. It didn't want the denim or the rubber. It only wanted the biological matter. I watched a sneaker drift past the vent. It bumped against a table leg. Then I saw movement that wasn't drifting. Something was wading through the fog. It looked like a person. It had the shape of a man. But it was made of the fog. A dense, coherent silhouette of black vapor walking through the looser mist. It stopped right under my vent. It looked up. It didn't have eyes. It didn't have a face. Just a smooth, black surface where a head should be. But I felt it looking at me. I felt the pressure of its attention. It was like standing under a high-voltage power line. The hair on my arms stood up. My fillings ached. I turned off my flashlight. I held my breath until my lungs burned. The thing below stood there for a long time. Then, slowly, it lowered its head and kept walking. It walked right through a solid oak table. It didn't break the table. It just passed through it like a ghost. I waited until I couldn't feel it any more. Then I started crawling again. Fast. My elbows bled on the metal. I didn't care. I needed a destination. I couldn't just live in the ducts. The library. The library had a secure server room. It had hardline phones. It had the security hub backup. And most importantly, the library was on the second floor. If the fog was heavy, if it acted like a liquid, maybe the second floor was clearer. I crawled for what felt like an hour. The muscles in my shoulders were screaming. The dust was clogging my throat. I reached the junction for the west wing. I took the left branch. Finally, I saw a grate labeled LIB 204. I crawled over to it. I shone my light through the slats. No fog. The air below looked clear. I used my Leatherman to unscrew the grate. I did it slowly. Screech. Turn. Screech. Turn. I pushed the grate down. It fell onto a bookshelf with a loud clang. I froze. Silence. I lowered my legs through the hole. I hung for a second, then dropped. I landed on the carpeted floor of the fiction section. I rolled, coming up with my pipe wrench in hand. The library was huge. High ceilings. Rows and rows of shelves. It was dim, lit only by the grey ambient light filtering through the massive, and now pitch-black, windows. It was empty. "Hello," I whispered. Nothing. I walked toward the circulation desk. I stayed low, crouching between the stacks. I reached the desk. There was a half-eaten sandwich on a plate, a cup of coffee with a lipstick stain on the rim. Mrs. Higgins' desk. The phone was off the hook. I picked it up. No dial tone. Just a low, static hiss. I put it down. I went to the computer. The screen was asleep. I jiggled the mouse. The screen flared to life. And my heart stopped. It wasn't a login screen. It was a chat window. An internal messaging system we used for staff. The screen was full of text. Scrolling fast. Gentlemen, math, it's in the room. Readers. History, don't look at it, rabbits. Admin, it took Sarah. Gentlemen. Math, where are the exits? Unknown user. Open the door. Unknown user. Open the door. Unknown user. I see you, Elias. I yanked the power cord out of the wall. The screen died. I see you, Elias. How? How did it know? I backed away from the desk. I bumped into a display of new arrivals. Books tumbled to the floor. Thump. And then, from the back of the library, near the reference section, an answer. Thump. A mimic. I raised my wrench. I sealed the boiler room, I said, my voice shaking. You can't trick me. Mr. Thorne. The voice was tiny, shaky. I pointed my light. Peeking out from under a heavy oak study table was a face. A girl. Maybe 16. Dark hair. Messy. She was wearing a debate team hoodie. She was clutching a thick hardcover book to her chest like a shield. It was Chloe. I knew her. She was one of the kids who always stayed late. "Are you real?" she whispered. Her eyes were wide, rimmed with red. She was squinting against my flashlight beam. I lowered the light. Yeah, Chloe. I'm real. I'm the janitor. She let out a sob that sounded like a hiccup. I saw you come out of the ceiling. I thought you were one of the shadow men. Shadow men. The ones that walk, she said. She crawled out from under the table. She was trembling so hard her teeth chattered. I saw them. In the hallway. They touched Mr. Henderson, and he just unraveled. Like smoke. She looked at my wrench. Then she looked at the keys on my belt. "Do you have the keys?" she asked. "Can we leave?" "We can't leave, Chloe," I said gently. "Outside is worse. Outside is all fog." She slumped against the table. "Then what do we do? Everyone else is gone. The whole debate team. We were in the study room. The fog came under the door and—" She snapped her fingers. "Gone." I looked around the library. It was defensible. One main door. No vents near the floor. We survive, I said. But we can't stay here. This room is too big. Too many glass windows. If those break, where then? I thought about the keys. I thought about the map of the school in my head. The fallout shelter, I said. She looked at me. We have a fallout shelter. Built in the 60s, I said. Under the swimming pool. Nobody has been down there in 30 years except me. It's got lead-lined walls. Air filtration. Supplies. Is it safe? I looked at the black windows. I looked at the computer screen I had just killed. It's the only place left, I said. But we have to cross the gym to get there. The gym. The largest open space in the school. Okay, she said. She stood up. She was terrified, but she was standing. Lead the way, Mr. Thorne. I gripped my wrench. Stay close, I said. And if I tell you to close your eyes, you close them. You understand. She nodded. I walked to the library doors. I put my ear against the wood. I listened. On the other side, in the hallway, I heard the sound of hundreds of bare feet slapping against the tile. Slap, slap, slap. Running. But nobody was screaming. I looked at Chloe. Ready. She took a breath. No. Me neither. I turned the key. I unlocked the library door. The bolt slid back with a clack that sounded like a gunshot in a canyon. I opened the door an inch. The smell hit us first. It wasn't the metallic scent of the steam tunnels or the dusty paper smell of the library. It smelled like rain on hot asphalt, ozone and wet earth. I peered out. The hallway, the West Wing corridor, was dim. The emergency lights were dying, flickering in that strobe light way that makes movement look jerky. The fog was here, but it wasn't a wall like it was outside. It was drifting. Patches of black mist floating knee-high, swirling around the lockers like dry ice at a cheap haunted house. But the sound, that slap, slap, slap I had heard through the door. It wasn't running. It wasn't feet. I stepped out, pulling Chloe behind me. She was gripping the back of my work shirt so hard I could feel her nails through the fabric. I looked down the hall. About 50 feet away, a vent was loose on the wall. It was flapping. The air pressure in the building was going crazy, sucking in and blowing out. The metal cover was slapping against the drywall. Slap, slap, slap. Just a vent, I whispered. It's just the building breathing. Chloe didn't look relieved. She was staring at the floor. Mr. Thorne, she whimpered. Look. I looked down. The hallway was littered with clothes. It wasn't like the cafeteria where things were floating. Here they were laid out. Piles of laundry. Jeans, hoodies, T-shirts, socks. They were crumpled on the floor in rough shapes. Here was a pair of jeans with a belt still buckled, legs bent as if the person had been mid-stride. There was a floral dress, pooled in a circle. And the shoes. Hundreds of shoes. Nikes, Vans, boots. They were all upright, left and right, tied. It looked like the rapture. Like everyone had just been vaporized out of their outfits instantly. Don't touch them, I said. My voice was rough. Don't step on them. We started walking. It was an obstacle course of the dead. I had to step over a pile of clothes that used to be Mr. Sampson, the biology teacher. I recognized his tweed jacket. His glasses were sitting neatly on the collar. We moved toward the double doors at the end of the hall. The gymnasium entrance. "Keep your eyes up," I told Chloe. "Don't look at the clothes. Look at my back." We were halfway down the hall when the slapping sound of the vent stopped. The silence rushed back in, heavy and sudden. Then, a new sound. Squeak. Rubber on linoleum. I froze. I held up a hand. Chloe bumped into me. Ahead of us, near the water fountain, a pile of clothes began to move. It was a grey hoodie and jeans. The fabric twitched. The arms of the hoodie inflated, puffing out as if an invisible arm was filling them. "It's trying to put them back on," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling on the edge of hysteria. The black fog seeped out of the lockers behind the clothes. It poured into the hoodie. The hood stood up. A face of black vapor formed inside it. It stood up. A hollow man. A suit of clothes animated by smoke. It turned toward us. It didn't have eyes, but the hood tilted. "Run," I said. I didn't whisper it this time. "Run." We sprinted. I'm not a runner. I'm a heavy man with bad knees. But fear is a hell of a fuel. I slammed my shoulder into the gymnasium doors. They flew open. We burst into the gym. If you've never been in a high school gym with the lights off, you don't know how big they feel. It's a cavern. The ceiling is 3 stories up, lost in darkness. The bleachers were pulled out on both sides, creating narrow canyons of wood and steel. The air here was colder, much colder. We stopped just inside the doors. I turned and jammed the handle with my pipe wrench, wedging it through the crash bar. Thud. The thing in the hoodie hit the door from the other side. The wrench groaned, but it held. "Mr. Thorne," Chloe hissed. "The court." I turned around. The basketball court wasn't empty. The fog was thick here. It swirled like a hurricane trapped in a box. And in the center of the court, under the dangling scoreboard, they were gathering. Shadow men. Dozens of them. Some were naked, just pure black silhouettes of vapor. Some were wearing the clothes they had stolen, Letterman jackets, gym uniforms, cheerleading skirts. They were standing in a circle, silent, swaying. They weren't looking at us. They were looking up. High above the court, caught in the rafters, was a single student, a boy. He had climbed up the climbing rope, the one for gym class, and had tied himself to the steel beam. He was alive. I could see him shivering. The shadow men were waiting for him to fall. "We can't help him," I said. It tasted like bile to say it. "We can't cross the court. We have to get to the other side," Chloe said. "The locker rooms are over there." She pointed across the sea of black mist. "Under the bleachers," I said. "We go under." We dropped to our hands and knees. We crawled into the gap behind the home team bleachers. It was a different world under there. Dust bunnies the size of rats. Old candy wrappers. The smell of cedar wood and old gum. It was dark, but the wooden slats of the bleachers above us sliced the light into thin ribbons. We crawled. Shuffle. Drag. Shuffle. Drag. To our left, through the metal framework of the bleachers, we could see the court. We could see the legs of the shadow men. They were drifting, gliding over the polished wood floor. And then I heard it. Thump, thump, swish. It was the sound of a basketball. I looked through the gap. One of the shadow men, a tall one, wearing a number 23 jersey, was holding a ball. But the ball was black. It was made of the fog. He bounced it. Thump. The sound vibrated through the floorboards into my palms. He shot. The ball arched through the air. It passed through the hoop without moving the net. Swish. It was a memory. The fog was replaying a memory of the game. "Don't stop," I whispered to Chloe. "Just keep moving." We were halfway across when my belt buckle caught on a metal support strut. Clink. It wasn't loud, but in that echo chamber, it was enough. On the court, the dribbling stopped. I saw the legs of the shadow men turn. All of them. 50 pairs of legs pivoting in unison toward the bleachers. They started to glide toward us. "Go," I hissed. "Crawl faster." We scrambled. I didn't care about noise now. I scraped my knuckles raw on the concrete. The shadow men hit the side of the bleachers. They didn't climb under. They slammed against the wood. The whole structure shook. Boom. Dust rained down on us. "They can't get under," Chloe yelled. "They're too tall." I looked back. She was right. They were rigid. They couldn't bend. They were pacing back and forth, slamming their misty fists against the wood, roaring with that sound like wind in a tunnel. "The exit!" I pointed. We reached the end of the bleachers. The door to the boys' locker room was 10 feet away across open ground. "On 3, I said. "We roll out and we run. 1, 2, 3. We scrambled out from the safety of the wood. A shadow man, wearing a referee's uniform, lunged at me. His hand was a claw of black smoke. I swung my flashlight. A heavy maglite is a good weapon. I didn't hit him. You can't hit smoke. But the beam of light cut right through his chest. The fog hissed. He recoiled, like I had burned him. Light hurts them. Not much, but it hurts. We dove through the locker room door. I slammed it and threw the deadbolt. I leaned against it, gasping for air. Chloe was on the floor, dry heaving. "We're okay," I wheezed. "We're okay." The locker room was tiled in white. It smelled of chlorine and mildew. The showers were dripping. Drip, drip, drip. "The pool," I said. "The fallout shelter entrance is in the pool pump room. Just through here." We walked through the showers. The tile was slippery. We stepped out onto the pool deck. I stopped. The pool area was a greenhouse. Glass roof. Glass walls. But there was no light coming in. The glass was pressed black with the fog outside. And the pool. The Olympic-sized swimming pool wasn't blue. The water was black. Ink black. The fog had settled into the water. It had saturated it. The surface was perfectly still, like a mirror made of obsidian. "The pump room is on the far side," I said, pointing to a metal door near the deep end. "We just have to walk around the edge." "Mr. Thorne," Chloe whispered. "The water." I looked. The black water was rising. It wasn't flooding. It was bubbling. Shapes were rising from the deep end. They weren't shadow men. They were things made of sludge. Thick, viscous liquid. They pulled themselves up onto the pool deck. Squelch. Slap. They looked like divers. Smooth, featureless heads. Bodies that glistened like oil. "They're different," I realized. "The dry ones are smoke. The wet ones." One of the sludge things turned toward us. It opened its mouth, a tear in the black goo, and let out a sound. It wasn't a roar. It was a gurgle. The sound of someone drowning. "Run to the door!" I shouted. We sprinted along the tiled edge of the pool. The sludge things were slow, clumsy, slipping on the wet tile. But there were so many of them. I reached the pump room door. I grabbed the handle. Locked. Of course. It was always locked. I grabbed my keys. 42 keys. Which one? Which one? Mr. Thorne, Chloe screamed. I looked back. One of the sludge things had grabbed her ankle. It wasn't pulling her down. It was absorbing her. The black goo was crawling up her leg, eating through her jeans. It burns, she screamed. It burns. I dropped the keys. I didn't think. I grabbed the pipe wrench from my belt. I swung it. Two-handed. I hit the thing's arm. Splat. It didn't break bone. It splashed. The arm exploded into black droplets. The thing recoiled, gurgling. I grabbed Chloe's hand and yanked her free. Her pant leg was smoking. "The keys!" she yelled. I looked down. The keys were on the floor, sliding toward the pool edge, sliding toward the black water. I dove. My fingers brushed the brass ring. I caught it. But my momentum carried me. My chest hit the wet tile. I slid. My head went over the edge of the pool. I looked down, inches from the surface of the black water, and looking back up at me, from just beneath the surface, was a face, perfectly detailed. It was my wife who had died 4 years ago. She smiled. Her teeth were black. "Come in, Elias," she bubbled. "The water is fine." I scrambled back, kicking, clawing at the tile. I dragged myself away from the edge. I jammed the key 14, into the pump room door. I turned it. We fell inside. I slammed the heavy metal door. I spun the wheel to lock it. It was a watertight bulkhead door. We were in the pump room. The roar of the pool filters was deafening in here. I looked at Chloe. She was clutching her leg. The denim was gone, eaten away. Her skin was red, blistered, like a chemical burn. "We made it," I said, leaning my forehead against the cool metal of the pump. "We're at the door to the shelter." I looked at the back wall. There was a hatch. Painted yellow. Civil Defense Shelter. Capacity 50. I walked over to it. I grabbed the wheel to spin it open. It didn't move. I strained. My muscles popped. It was rusted shut. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I hit the hatch with my wrench. Clang. "Open!" I screamed. From the other side of the hatch, from inside the shelter, someone knocked back. Knock, 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 knock. 3 distinct raps. Metal on metal. I stared at the yellow wheel of the hatch. My hand was still vibrating from the impact of my wrench. "Hello!" I shouted. I put my mouth right up to the seam of the door. "Is someone in there?" Silence. Then a muffled voice, thick, distorted by inches of steel. "Go away." It was a male voice, trembling. "We can't go away," I yelled. I looked back at the bulkhead door behind us. The wheel was starting to turn. Slowly. The sludge things, the drowned, were outside. They were smart enough to turn a wheel. "Open the hatch. I have a student with me. She's hurt." "Don't lie," the voice said. I heard the water. I heard them screaming. "I'm Elias Thorne." I slammed my palm against the yellow paint. "I'm the head custodian. I have the keys. I'm with Chloe from the debate team. Open the damn door." Chloe slid down the wall next to me. She was pale, her teeth gritted against the pain in her leg. The red blisters were weeping clear fluid. "Please," she sobbed, "please let us in." From the other side of the hatch, I heard a scrape, like a chair being dragged. "Elias?" the voice asked. "The janitor?" "Yes." "Open it." I can't. It's jammed. The wheel won't turn from this side either." I tried. I looked at the wheel on my side. It was coated in 40 years of pool chemical corrosion, rust and calcium buildup. It was fused solid. Behind us, the bulkhead door groaned. A seam of black liquid appeared at the seal. They were breaking in. "Stand back," I told the voice. I looked at my tool belt. I grabbed a can of PB Blaster, penetrating oil. I sprayed the hinges. I sprayed the central nut of the wheel. The smell of the chemical was sharp, biting through the chlorine stench. I hooked my pipe wrench onto the wheel spoke. It wasn't long enough. I couldn't get the torque. I looked around the pump room. I needed a cheetah bar, a pipe to extend the handle. There, a scrap piece of galvanized steel pipe leaning in the corner. I grabbed it, slid it over the handle of my wrench. Now I had 3 feet of leverage. I braced my boot against the wall. "Chloe," I grunted, "when this opens, you drop. You don't climb, you fall. Understand?" She nodded. I pulled. The metal shrieked. A high-pitched squeal that set my teeth on edge. Crack. The rust seal broke. The wheel spun a quarter turn. "Turn it from your side." I screamed at the steel. "Now!" I felt the wheel moving under my hands. We were turning it together. Me and the stranger. Spin. Spin. Clank. The dogs unlatched. I grabbed the handle and heaved the heavy steel door outward. A rush of stale, dead air hit me in the face. It smelled like a museum basement. Old paper and dry rot. "Go!" I grabbed Chloe by the back of her hoodie and shoved her into the hole. She tumbled down the ladder, landing with a thud on a concrete floor below. I threw my wrench down. Then my bag. I scrambled into the hole just as the bulkhead door to the pump room burst open. A wave of black water rushed into the room above me. I looked up and saw a black, oily hand reaching for the hatch rim. I grabbed the internal handle of the hatch and slammed it shut. Boom! I spun the wheel from the inside. Lock, lock, lock. I collapsed on the floor of the shelter. Above us, on the roof of the hatch, something banged. Once, twice, then silence. I lay there in the dark, listening to my own heart trying to punch through my ribs. "Don't shoot," a voice whispered. I rolled over and clicked on my mag light. The beam cut through the dust. Sitting in the corner, holding a heavy textbook like a weapon, was Mr. Vance, the chemistry teacher. He was wearing his lab coat, one sleeve torn. His glasses were crooked. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 6 hours. "Mr. Vance," I wheezed. He lowered the book. He blinked in the light. "Elias, you're real." "I'm real." I sat up and swept the light around the room. We were in a concrete cylinder, maybe 20 feet across. It was a relic. The walls were painted that institutional mint green they loved in the 60s. Along one wall were shelves stacked with yellow metal drums labeled civil defense. Drinking water. There were boxes of carbohydrate crackers that had expired before I was born. In the center of the room was a wooden table with a ham radio that looked like a toaster oven. And in the corner, curled up on a cot, were 2 other students. Varsity jackets. Football players. Mike and Travis. Big kids. Linebackers. They were hugging each other, crying silently. "Is that it?" I asked. "Just you 3. Mr. Vance nodded. He wiped sweat from his bald head. We were in the chem lab when it happened. We ran. The tunnels. I remembered the tunnels led here. I stood up. My knees popped. Chloe needs help. She's got a chemical burn. Mr. Vance scrambled up. I have a first aid kit. A new one. I grabbed it from the lab. He hurried over to Chloe. She was conscious, but her eyes were glassy. Shock was setting in. I walked over to the air filtration unit on the far wall. It was a massive grey box with a hand crank backup. I checked the gauge. Air quality. Moderate. Filter status. Replace. Great, I muttered. I tapped the glass of the gauge. The needle wobbled. How long have you been down here? I asked the room. Since 9 a.m., Mike, one of the football players, said. His voice was deep but cracked. We heard people screaming outside the hatch for an hour. Then it stopped. I looked at the heavy steel ceiling. The drowned were right above us. We're safe, I lied. This place is watertight. Airtight. Is it? Mr. Vance asked. He was wrapping gauze around Chloe's leg. Elias, look at the vent. I followed his finger. In the corner, near the floor, was an outflow vent. A simple grate. A tiny wisp of black vapor was curling out of it. Just a thread. Like smoke from a blown-out candle. The shelter is airtight, I said. But the ventilation system connects to the surface. I walked over to the vent. I put my hand near it. It was cold. Do we have duct tape? I asked. In the kit, Vance said. I grabbed the roll of silver tape. I taped over the vent. Layer after layer. Vertical. Horizontal. I sealed it until it was a silver patch on the green wall. The wisp stopped. Temporary, I said. If the pressure builds up out there, tape won't hold it. We need to call for help, Travis said. He pointed at the radio. Does that work? I walked over to the ham radio. It was a tube model. Ancient. I checked the power cord. It was plugged into a wall outlet that was dead. No power, I said. There's a generator, Vance said. In the back closet. But we didn't want to turn it on. The noise. The noise doesn't matter now, I said. They know we're here. I went to the closet. A small Honda generator, red and dusty, sat there. It was newer than the shelter. Someone had put it here maybe 10 years ago. I checked the gas. Half a tank. I pulled the cord. Sputter. Die. Come on, I whispered. Don't be like the bus driver. I pulled again. Harder. Vroom. The generator roared to life. The sound was deafening in the small concrete room. I flipped the breaker on the wall. The overhead lights flickered on, dim, yellow bulbs in cages. Mr. Vance cheered. A weak, desperate sound. I went back to the radio. The tubes were glowing orange, warming up. The static hissed through the speaker. I turned the dial. Channel 1. Static. Channel 2. Static. Channel 3. Music? I stopped turning. It was faint, crushed by interference. But it was music. A piano. A loop. Just 3 notes. Ping, ping, ping. Is that a broadcast? Chloe asked from the floor. Hush, I said. I adjusted the fine-tuning knob. The music stopped. A voice cut through. Sector 4 is compromised. Repeat. Sector 4 is gone. If you can hear this, Do not go to the stadium. I repeat, do not go to the stadium. The collection point has moved to. Static swallowed the voice. Moved to where? Vance yelled at the radio. Where? I spun the dial, searching for the signal again. Moved to the water tower. High ground. The fog is heavy. It sinks. Go high. Go high. The signal died. I looked at the group. The water tower, Mike said. That's 3 miles away. Through the woods. We can't make that, Vance said, shaking his head. We can't even get out of this room. I looked at the map pinned to the wall. A faded civil defense map of the school grounds from 1968. The water tower is the highest point in the county, I said. It makes sense. If the fog acts like a liquid, the high ground is the only safe place. But we're underground, Chloe said softly. The room went silent. She was right. We were in a hole. If the fog was heavy, if it was sinking, we were essentially sitting in the drain. I looked at the taped-over vent. The tape was bulging slightly. Just a little bubble. The pressure was building. We can't stay here, I said. We have supplies. We have light. But this room is going to fill up. Maybe in an hour, maybe in a day. But it will fill up. So we go back out. Travis asked, his eyes wide. Into the pool room? With those things? No, I said. We don't go up. We go across. I walked over to the back wall of the shelter. There was a large metal plate bolted to the concrete. It was labeled Emergency Egress, Tunnel B. Where does that go? Vance asked. The old coal chute, I said. I remembered the blueprints. Before the school switched to gas boilers, they used coal. There's a tunnel that runs from here, under the football field, to the old boiler house on the edge of the property. The boiler house? Mike asked. It's separate from the main building, I said, and it has a ladder to the roof, a smokestack. Is the tunnel clear? Chloe asked. I looked at the bolts on the plate. Rusted. Fused. I don't know, I said, but I have a wrench. I spent the next 20 minutes fighting the bolts. My hands were bleeding. My wrench was slipping. Vance and the boys helped. We took turns hammering the wrench to break the seals. One by one, the bolts screamed and gave way. We pulled the plate off. It fell with a heavy thud that shook the floor. The tunnel behind it was round concrete, about 4 feet in diameter. It was dark, and it smelled earthy. I shone my light down it. It stretched endlessly into the dark. I'll go first, I said. Mike, you bring up the rear. Carry Chloe if she can't walk. I can walk, Chloe said, gritting her teeth. She stood up, leaning on Mr. Vance. Tough kid. I climbed into the tunnel. It was tight, claustrophobic. The air was thin. We crawled. Single file. Me, Chloe, Vance, Travis, Mike. The sound of our breathing was loud in the pipe. About 50 yards in, I stopped. Something was blocking the tunnel ahead. A pile of debris. I shone the light. It wasn't debris. It was a nest, made of clothes. Shredded jackets, gym shorts, insulation. And sitting on top of the nest, staring at me with reflective green eyes, was a rat. But not a normal rat. This thing was the size of a cat. And its fur was moving, shifting, like the fog. It hissed at me. The sound was like escaping steam. What is it? Vance whispered from behind me. "A rat," I said. "A big one." The rat didn't back down. It stepped toward me. And then, it dissolved. It didn't run away. It just fell apart into a puff of black smoke. The smoke swirled in the tunnel, hanging in the air. "Masks up!" I yelled. "Pull your shirts over your noses!" I scrambled backward, pushing Chloe back. The black rat smoke drifted toward us. It didn't dissipate. It was hunting. "It's not a rat," I yelled. "It's a scout. Go back. Go back." "We can't go back," Mike yelled from the rear. "The shelter. The vent broke. I can hear it hissing. We were trapped. Fog in front of us. Fog behind us." I looked at the pipe wall. Above me, I saw a rusty iron rung embedded in the concrete. And another. A manhole ladder. "Up!" I shouted. "There's a maintenance hatch. Up!" I grabbed the rung. It was cold, slimy. I hauled myself up into a vertical shaft. I pushed against the manhole cover above. It was heavy, frozen shut. I put my shoulder into it. I screamed with the effort. The cover popped. Grey light spilled in. I climbed out. I was outside, on the 50-yard line of the football field. The snow was waist-deep. The sky was a swirling vortex of black clouds. But the air here was breathable. The fog was low, hugging the ground like a carpet. "Come on!" I reached down and grabbed Chloe's hand. I pulled her up into the snow. One by one, we poured out of the ground. 5 of us. Shivering, wet, terrified. We stood in the center of the football field. The stadium lights were off. The bleachers were empty. But the field wasn't. Standing in the end zones, on both sides, were the shadow men. Hundreds of them. They were facing us. And then the stadium speakers, the PA system, clicked on. A screech of feedback echoed across the snow. And then a voice. My voice. "Zone 5. Breach. Zone 5. Breach." It was a recording of me calling in a spill 3 years ago. The shadow men started to run. The PA system shrieked again. "Zone 5. Breach. Mr. Thorne to the office. Mr. Thorne." It was mocking me. The fog wasn't just biology. It was memory. It had absorbed the school, and now it was using the school's voice to hunt us. The shadow men in the end zones began to sprint. They didn't run like people. They moved like ink injected into water. Fast, fluid streams of darkness cutting across the white snow. "Run!" I screamed. To the maintenance shed. Under the bleachers. We scrambled through the deep snow. It was a nightmare. Every step was a battle. My boots sank to my knees. Chloe was limping, dragging her burned leg, screaming with every step. Mike scooped her up. He was a linebacker. He carried her like she was a doll. "Go! Go! Go!" Travis yelled, swinging a piece of pipe he'd grabbed from the tunnel. We hit the sidelines just as the first wave of shadow men reached the hash marks. They didn't tackle. They swarmed. One of them caught Travis. It didn't grab him. It passed through him. Travis stopped running. He stood freezing in the snow, his eyes wide. He looked at his hands. "I'm cold," he whispered. Then he collapsed. Not into the snow, but into himself. His clothes slumped to the ground as if his body had instantly turned to gas. His jacket landed flat. His helmet rolled away. "Don't look." I grabbed Vance by the collar and hauled him toward the shed. We slammed into the corrugated metal door of the maintenance shed. It was locked. I fumbled for my keys. My hands were frozen claws. I couldn't feel the brass. "Mr. Thorne," the PA system boomed, directly overhead now. "Did you lock the door? Did you check the perimeter?" "Shut up!" I screamed at the speakers. I found the key. The square-headed one. I jammed it in. I twisted. The lock snapped. The cold had made the metal brittle. The key broke off in the lock. "No!" Vance shouted. Behind us, the shadow men were closing in, a wall of darkness eating the football field. I looked at the padlock. I looked at the heavy hasp. "Mike!" I yelled. "The door!" Mike put Chloe down. He stepped back, roared, a primal, terrified sound, and threw his shoulder into the door. Bang! The metal dented. He hit it again. Crang! The hasp ripped out of the rotting wood frame. The door swung inward. We fell inside just as the black fog washed over the threshold. The shed smelled of diesel and grease. "Block the door!" I yelled. Vance and Mike shoved a workbench against the opening. The shadow men slammed against the metal siding. The whole shed rattled like a tin can in a hailstorm. "We can't stay here," Chloe whimpered from the floor. "They'll get in." She was right. The black fog was already curling under the walls. I looked around. This was where the groundskeeping equipment lived. Shovels, rakes, and the tractor, a massive orange Kubota diesel tractor with a snowblower attachment on the front. I ran to it. I climbed into the cab. The keys were in the ignition. Groundskeepers never take them out. I turned it. The glow plugs warmed up. Click, click. "Start, you beautiful bastard," I prayed. I turned it. Chug, 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 vroom. The diesel engine roared to life. The smell of exhaust filled the shed. "Get on!" I yelled. Everyone on the tractor. Mike and Vance hoisted Chloe onto the hood. They grabbed the roll bars on the sides. "Hang on!" I threw it into gear. I slammed the throttle forward. I didn't aim for the door. I aimed for the back wall. The wall that faced the woods. The wall that faced the water tower. The tractor lurched. The massive tires spun, then caught. We hit the aluminum wall at 15 miles an hour. Crunch. Metal tore. Wood splintered. We burst through the back of the shed in a shower of debris. We were out. In the woods. The snow here was untouched. 4 feet deep. But the tractor didn't care. The snowblower on the front chewed into the drifts, spraying a geyser of white powder high into the air. We carved a path through the forest. Behind us, the shed imploded as the fog crushed it. The shadow men poured out of the wreckage. They floated through the trees, effortless, silent. "Faster, Elias!" Vance screamed. "They're gaining. I'm flooring it!" I yelled. The tractor was shaking, bouncing over hidden stumps. Ahead, through the trees, I saw it. The water tower. A massive steel legs rising into the dark sky. A ladder running up the center standpipe. "We have to climb." I yelled over the engine roar. "I can't climb," Chloe cried. "My leg." "We'll carry you," Mike shouted. "We're not leaving you." The tractor hit a ditch. We went airborne for a second. We slammed down hard. The engine sputtered. Died. Silence rushed back in. We were 50 yards from the base of the tower. "Run!" We bailed off the tractor. The snow was up to my thighs. We slogged toward the ladder. The fog was nipping at our heels. I could feel the cold radiating from it. Mike reached the ladder first. He grabbed Chloe. "I'm going up. Vance, you're next. Elias, go." Mike started climbing, Chloe clinging to his back. He was strong, powering up the frozen rungs. Vance went next. I grabbed the ladder. My gloves were wet, slippery. I looked back. The shadow men were at the tractor. They were swarming over it, and leading them was Travis, or the thing that used to be Travis. It was walking through the snow, wearing Travis's shape in black vapor. It looked at me. It opened its mouth. "Code Red, Mr. Thorne," it said in my voice. "Code Red." I started climbing. I climbed past the first landing. 20 feet up. 40 feet up. My lungs were burning. My heart was fluttering like a dying bird. Below me, the fog began to rise. It was climbing the tower legs. It was chasing us up. "Keep going," Vance yelled from above. "Don't look down." I reached the catwalk, the walkway that circles the tank, 100 feet in the air. Mike and Chloe were already there. They were huddled against the tank. I pulled myself over the railing. I collapsed on the metal grating. "We made it," I gasped. "Did we?" Mike pointed. I stood up and looked over the railing. The fog wasn't stopping. It was rising faster now. It was swallowing the ladder. It was bubbling up around the catwalk. And climbing the ladder, hand over hand, was the Travis thing. It moved impossibly fast. Clang, clang, clang. "It's coming up," Vance screamed. "Open the hatch. Get inside the tank." I looked at the hatch on the roof of the tank. "It's full of water," I said. "We can't go in there." "Then we go to the very top," Mike yelled. "The roof." We scrambled up the final ladder to the domed roof of the water tower. We stood on the curve of the steel, the highest point in the county. The fog rose. It engulfed the catwalk below us. It swirled around the edges of the dome. We were on an island of steel in a sea of black. The Travis thing vaulted over the railing. It stood on the edge of the roof. It raised a hand. The fog surged behind it, like a tidal wave about to crash over us. "It's over," Vance whispered. "There's nowhere left to go." I looked at the thing. I looked at the fog. And then I looked at my belt. 42 keys. The keys to the school. The keys to the gym. The keys to the boiler room. They were heavy. They were my identity. They were the anchors holding me to the place that had just tried to eat me. I unclipped the ring. The brass jingled. A bright, sharp sound in the muffled darkness. The Travis thing tilted its head. It looked at the keys. "You want in," I whispered. "You want the school?" I stepped forward. "Elias, no." Chloe screamed. I swung the heavy ring of keys. I threw them. Not at the thing. I threw them over the edge. Into the deep, black ocean of fog below. "Go get them!" I roared. The keys fell. Jingle, jingle. The Travis thing turned. It watched the keys fall. And then the fog turned. The massive wall of black vapor surged downward. It chased the sound. It chased the symbol of the place it had conquered. The Travis thing dissolved, sucked down into the vortex of the descending fog. The black sea drained away, dropping lower, 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 until it settled back down to the ground, hiding the horror beneath it. 85:00, 90:00. The Custodian. We stood there on the roof of the water tower for a long time, shivering, silent. Slowly, the clouds above us began to break. Real light. Moonlight. Pale and cold, but real. "Look," Chloe whispered. I looked out at the horizon. In the distance, sticking up out of the black sea of fog, were other islands. The radio tower on the North Hill, a blinking red light. The roof of the hospital, a white light. The grain silos in the east, a flare. We weren't the only ones. People had found the high ground. They were signaling. I reached for my belt to grab my keys, and my hand grasped nothing but empty air. A pang of loss hit me, sharp and deep. I felt naked without them. Those keys were 22 years of my life. But then I looked at Chloe. She was leaning against Mike, alive. I looked at Vance, wiping his glasses. I wasn't the custodian of the building anymore. The building was gone. The keys were gone. I looked at the flare burning in the distance. "Mr. Thorne," Chloe said, "what do we do now?" I took a deep breath of the thin, cold air. It didn't smell like floor wax or copper pipes. It smelled like snow and pine. "We wait for morning," I said. "And then we figure out how to build bridges." I sat down on the cold steel, my back against the vent pipe. I watched the lights on the horizon. My name is Elias Thorne. I used to carry 42 keys. Now, I carry nothing but the lives of 3 people and a story you probably won't believe. But if you're listening to this, if you found this recording, that means the fog receded. That means you found the recorder I dropped. Don't go into the school. Don't go into the tunnels. Whatever is down there, it has the keys now.